Hello, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So going to start out with the stats and basically where we're looking the first week of February here. Hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day yesterday, by the way. But basically the single family homes went down to 300 this week from 357 the week before. So the week before was kind of the end of the month. I guess it was the end of the month. The end of the month was actually on Saturday. And so basically they're a little bit higher always at the end of the month. The median price went down to 4,025. So basically this is probably about the lowest that it's been. It was kind of down here 2 weeks ago, so we'll have to see if we do have some kind of a trend starting. It was up again last week, so, it's kind of in that up, down, and all of that kind of stuff. So we have to look at the trends, can't just look at what's going on this week. And the inventory continued to increase this week by 98. And so that's, part of the reason why prices could be heading down. We're getting to that point where it's getting to be a buyer's market, but we'll just have to look at it and see what's happening. So of those 300, 36 of them were under 250, 25 were between 250 and 300, 27 between 300 and 400, 48 between 400 and 500, 87 between 500 and a million, and 22 over a million. I'm sorry, it was 87 between 300 and 400. I couldn't read it for a minute. I said 27, and I was like going, that really is not what it's supposed to be. So the highest, with that median price being right there at 402 this week, that's why there should have been a lot more in that price point. Okay, so we're at 6.36 months of inventory right now. And so that would, again, indicate that we're kind of in that buyer's market. 4 to 6 is considered a normal market, so just a little bit above it. 4.07 months under 250 and 4.9, 250 to 300. And we don't go up until we get to 400 to 500, and then it's showing about 9 months of inventory. And then between 500 and a million, we're at 7.6, and we're at 8.89 over a million. So to me, what that kind of shows us is that this particular week, more houses sold on the lower end, and because we were kind of all the way across the board. So maybe some things are happening on the high end over there, which is something that we'll have to keep our eye on and see kind of what's going on next week and the week after. So list to ask price ratio is at 96.66. That's down a little bit, pretty consistent in regards to what's been going on. Under 250, it was at 96.24 and 96.14, 250 to 300. Then it goes to 97s from 300 up to 500, and then 500 to a million, it's at 96 again, and then 96 also over a million. So that's kind of what's going on. So the higher end and the lower end are still doing exactly the same way of what we would always expect them to do. Then when we're looking at condos, townhomes, and villas, there were 101 that sold this week, and it was 95 the week before, so just a little bit higher. That price increased to 268 is basically what happened with them. So that's another situation in regards to what's going on out there. So the under 250, there were 44 of those 100, 15 between 250 and 300, 30 between 300 and 400, 10 between 400 and 500, 3 500 to a million, and 1 over a million. So what we're looking at because the amount that sold this week is a little bit better, we're only at 9.48 months of inventory, and the winner for the most months of inventory is 250 to 300, which is looking at 11.31, and then 11.7, 400 to 500, 500 to a million is at 21 months of inventory. And then it's saying that over a million is at 5.31, but we went 3 weeks without anything selling over a million. So that would, kind of bring that up to well over a year's worth of inventory in that price point. So, as I'm going through that, and I know I'm going through the stats really quick and everything like that, and you're going, whoa, hold on, probably, or get past them, one or the other. But basically, in my opinion, what's really going on here is that the condo market is still very much a buyer's market. You have to be very aggressive when you've got a condo to make sure that you're pricing it very well, because there's probably other condos that are in your same development. And if there's too many of them, then what's going to happen is that yours may never even be shown if you're not priced appropriately. And that's the biggest thing that people run into. And even if it's in the area, that people are looking at, and then all you need is one person to lower a price on something, and then basically, it's like everybody's going, oh my gosh. For example, there's a townhouse that I was looking at that basically, been watching it and all of that kind of stuff. It actually appraised by a bank at $500,000, and this is a 5-bedroom, 5.5 bath townhouse. It's got a pool, all of those kinds of things. Great neighborhood, lots of amenities, all that good stuff. Okay, but there are several of them that are on the market right now at $470,000. This is in a short-term rental community, and so they're a little unique from the regular sales and everything that are out there. They're not really unique in any kind of the way that, that they're built or anything like that. They're all great. But the challenge with them is that we do run into situations where people are buying them for an Airbnb, and then they're not necessarily getting the return on them that they expected. And as a result of that, they're going, okay, I just want to cut and run and everything. And a lot of the people, if you buy something that doesn't have rental history, it's just a guess in regards to what it's going to do. And so then, and you've got to have all that time where you're building it up and everything like that. Now, there are plenty of short-term rental communities out there and properties out there that do have rental history. So you can look at them and you can say, okay, well, this makes sense and all of that. And so you kind of go that route. But getting back to my story in regards to this property that appraised by the bank at $499,000. Well, there are several of them on the market at $470,000. So, and they're not necessarily selling quickly at this point in time. So when the bank is going in there and saying it's worth $499,000, maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But from what I have seen, that at this point in time, that it's heading down in that particular neighborhood. And that, again, is a short-term rental, which they kind of many times go down before they go back up. What I mean by that is that these are relatively new, and what happens is that they sell them to people, and then people say, oh, wow, this is not bringing in the return of what I expected, and so I want to sell, and so we're going to go ahead and put it on the market, and we don't care. We just want to get rid of it. We want as much of our money back as we can, because we've got very high overhead, because the HOA fees are very high. We've got property management, and we're not making any money on it. And, usually that's a couple, 3 years into after they're completed building, after somebody's bought it new and they've got it all going. But during that time, a lot of them will get some people that are coming down here consistently and coming to those developments, but they're kind of, they had to go through all the growing pains of it. And so they're kind of going, they're kind of getting out of it. So what happens is that those units a couple of years later kind of go down because a lot of people sell, and then they kind of stabilize after that first sale, after the original sale. And I would say within the first 5 years, after the 5 years, they're very stable and you can count on exactly what's going on. But a lot of those new developments, I've seen that time and time again, that something like that happens, that if you're going to go in there, that it might take a little bit of a dive and then it'll, stabilize and start heading up. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555 or find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I was talking about new communities and especially this Airbnb one, and I was so it's like when you have sellers call you and somebody and they're trying to figure out in regards to what's going on and what they should do and all of that kind of stuff, and you feel bad for them, some of them, in regards to what they were told and everything initially, and there were prospectus and all that stuff that was put out there for them. And I can think of one particular neighborhood, for example, that the people bought, and they were from Mexico, and they were promised that they were going to make a lot of money on it. I think it was about a 20% return, which seemed too good to be true and ended up being too good to be true. And in this particular development, I believe there's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,000 units that exist in this particular development. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's got all of the amenities. It's definitely a place where you would want to go on vacation and all of that kind of good stuff. It's absolutely beautiful. But the challenge with it is that, when it went down, meaning that there were a lot of people that were promised the same thing as these people we were talking to. And so there were 200 units on the market, 200. And so when there's 200 of 1,000 on the market, which is 20% of everything that exists out there, the first question that somebody looks at is they go, why? What's going on? And so they were just, it kind of takes people aback because they go, that really doesn't look like a good investment, or what's happening on it. And so what happened, and what happens, is basically that the price in those communities definitely go down, because there are some sellers that are just like, I just want to get out of it. It's not their primary residence. So, it's not like they're going to be homeless if they sell it, or if they sell it for a loss. Many times they paid cash for it, and they're just looking at it like, hey, I want to get the most money that I can out of it and go from there, because it's costing them more money than they're getting from it. So they've got more carrying costs even without having a loan or anything on it. So they definitely, just wanted to get out of it. It wasn't the right thing for them. And they thought that they would rather put their money in their own country where something is, doing something better for them. So when it does come to an Airbnb or short-term rental kind of community, in my opinion, you really have to look at it and see, what your long-term goals are, how much you're willing to wait for the business to get going. As any time when you start a business, it doesn't necessarily make money the first second. You have to, build up that marketing and get everything going to get people in there and then get things going. And so how long can you, wait for that to happen? Or are you buying something turnkey that the reservations are coming with the property and all of that kind of stuff? Because there are people that are very successful in short-term rental, and then there are people that are very frustrated with it. And so I think that you just need to be very educated. You need to have the right property management in order to do that. And there's several companies that we're aware of that we recommend because, we've seen their track record, and that's basically, the best that we can go on. And we give everybody 3 people that we think would be good, for you to talk to and that kind of stuff. And then you can make your decision from there. And if you find somebody else, then that's great. And it basically comes down to, what your real purposes of a short-term rental is. I remember, and I've probably told this story before, but I was working with this guy from Canada, and he was looking at short-term rental. He wanted to own a property in the United States, and so he decided to go that route. So we went ahead and we found him a great property, and it was for a great price. Low HOA, came with the pool, all the stuff, furnished, everything that he was looking for. And so then, it came time to look at what he wanted to do with it. And he was going to, it wasn't a short-term rental community, and he just decided to keep with the property management and everything that was doing it at that point in time. And he did that for maybe 2 months. And then he said, hey, something isn't making sense here, because the property management and the people that were booking it, so the people that owned it before him were from the United Kingdom. And so a lot of the people that were coming to that particular home were from the United Kingdom. And what ended up happening is that the people from the UK that were booking it, that were in the UK, they were getting a portion of the commission. Then the people that were that were managing it here in the U.S., they were getting a portion of the booking and everything like that. And then there was an accountant involved, and all of these different layers of all these different people. And it ended up that, when it was booked 98% of the time, that it was a loss. And he had paid cash for it. And like the HOA fee, it was a house. So the HOA fee was like $110 a month and stuff like that. So, I mean, it wasn't like there were huge carrying costs that were on top of it outside of the management and the people that were, putting all the booking together. So we did an analysis and determined that he was going to be much further ahead if he did long-term rental versus short-term rental. And he did that. And, just happy as all get out with that, because he had, a tenant that's in there, and usually the tenants last somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2 to 3 years on average. And so, he had consistent income coming in, great tenants, no wear and tear on the property per se, because he got great tenants. And as a result of that, it's been kind of a painless endeavor and all of that kind of stuff. But you have to look at it and see what makes sense. And unfortunately, if you're not here, then you're reliant on a lot of people that are. And so, I'm not saying don't do it, because a lot of people want to have a piece of Florida, and who wouldn't? And sometimes they want it because they're going to retire here eventually. They use it as a business purposes. I've got some other clients that they come down here I would say about 12 to 15 times a year. And so as a result of that, they want their own place that they can just, have available whenever they want to come, and they don't rent it out and everything like that. So it truly is a second home. But basically, you have to know what you're doing when it comes down to it, figure out what's best for you and your family, and then make the decision based on that. And I will talk a little bit about new construction outside of the short-term rental realm when we get back from the break, because I think that that's something that you also have to you also have to look at and consider when things are going on in neighborhoods around you. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold, Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I said I was going to talk about new construction in general and how the neighborhoods and everything are affected by that. I also find this very interesting. You know, I've seen some things lately that I thought were just fascinating when it comes to that. And basically there are, sometimes there are some builders that are building out a particular neighborhood, and then they decide that maybe it's going a little bit slower than they would like it to, or something in this market, kind of what happened. And so what they did is they sold some lots to another builder. I think that the neighborhood is about 500, and they sold about 60 to another builder to come in and build and move, houses in that neighborhood too, just to get it closed out quicker and all of that kind of thing. Now, the interesting thing is that this, and I saw that this same company did it with two particular neighborhoods. They sold, roughly in both of them, they sold out 60 houses to each of them. Now, this other builder that came in, they're a very big production builder, and they priced them appropriately. They're probably about 50 to 100,000 less than what the other builder was, and they could do it because they do everything to scale and everything like that. And they sold out those 60 lots and are closed and done in the same amount of time that the original builder probably has sold maybe 5 or 10 properties, and that's it. And when I was thinking about it and looking at it, basically it's not a lot different than a regular home seller out there that's putting their house on the market that says, hey, I just want to test the price and see what happens. And what happens is many times is that you're kind of left in the dust is what happens. So these guys, sold off that land, and they got some cash flow and all of that kind of good stuff. They got some excitement going on in the neighborhood, and that other builder has come and gone, and they're still, they're building at their price and everything, and basically not selling, whereas the other builder sold out immediately, like within 3 or 4 months, they sold them out. Now they were still continuing to build them and stuff like that. So the whole thing probably took them about 7 or 8 months, from beginning to end. But it really is very interesting to me the way that works and the way that it looks. Now the thing is, if you bought from that really big production builder, you got what you considered a really good deal, and I would consider a really good deal too. And you're probably not going to lose anything on your investment. If you bought with that builder that maybe is a little bit high, I would say, or is higher, you might have to look at, what's going to happen long term and how long are they going to be building and all of that, which I think they're going to be building in those neighborhoods probably for 4 or 5 years. And the challenge is, if you buy in a neighborhood where they're going to be building for 4 or 5 years, and say that you want to sell 2 years from now or 3 years from now or whatever, if you want to sell 7 after they're all done, it's not going to matter. But if you want to sell when a builder is still building in a neighborhood, you could be, facing a couple of challenges. Now, I'm not saying you can't do it, because I have definitely helped people do that when they have, sold a couple of years later after it was recently built and the builder is still building in that area. And the reason that you have to be concerned about that is because the builder, like I said, this big production builder, they've got a lot of money behind them and a lot of things that they can do, and they can look at, okay, how can we economize on this to give a good product, same square footage as that house across the street, but maybe it's going to cost the same amount of money that it cost when you bought it, but they're going to be able to offer, $30,000 towards buy down of an interest rate that's going to make it so more people can afford it. So, even though the price on the top looks the same, the price on the bottom might not be the same. And so that's what you've got to really be careful of. And then people are going, gosh, I can get a brand new house for a lower interest rate and move in there versus going in there and getting getting something that is, that somebody has already lived in and all of that. And the builders will tell you that, hey, do you really want to get a house that somebody else has lived in? And I'm like thinking, well, eventually you would think that your houses, that you would want to promote that your houses are great and that people would, I'll never forget, and where I'm going with this, and I apologize, I'm kind of all over the map, but where I'm going with this is I remember going into a builder and the builder said, you definitely want to get a brand new house because you don't want to take the problems of an old house that exists here. And I looked at the guy and I said, didn't you guys build that house right over there that you're saying that, that you're kind of slamming now? And he was like, yeah. And I'm like going, but that doesn't make sense that you would say that you're building a product that, a couple years later that the one that you're building now is far superior to, because you would think that you would want to have that quality, workmanship that definitely, it doesn't matter if it's, 30 years old, that it's still a great house and everything. And he said, oh yeah, I really need to look at it that way. But basically, you got to understand that some of those salespeople, that's exactly what they're saying, is that they're saying, hey, this house is better. Nobody's lived in it. And it is true. If you could get a new house for the same price as another house that somebody else has out there that's in the same neighborhood that might be 3 or 4 years old, and you're going, well, this one is, perfect and nobody's lived in it. And so you've got to kind of look at all that. So it does come into location. So if you do have a property that's on some water, or you've got a good rear, view, that you've got conservation or something, or that you're on a big lot, or anything that is definitely going to distinguish your house above other houses, then that's something that you might want to consider when it comes down to it and looking at it. But basically, what happens and what's going on is that you just definitely have to look at the whole big picture. And, most people are in their houses on average, I think it's like 7.3 years. And so you're not probably going to run into that if you're buying new construction. But I always want to point it out to people, because you want to look and see exactly, worst case scenario, what's going to happen. And where do I want to be, and all that kind of good stuff. And so I definitely think it's worth looking at and trying to figure out, what's your best bet and all that kind of good stuff. So I do want to remind everybody again that we are now on February 15th. And so basically you've got 2 weeks left to apply for homestead this year if you owned your house in 2025. So homestead is for your taxes. It gives you a nice tax savings. It makes sure that your taxes don't increase substantially year over year. It's considered a Save Our Homes Act and everything like that, the Homestead Act. So you do have to get that filed for before March 1st, not March 1st, in February. And so you've got a couple more weeks to do that. And you do it with the appraisers. You do it through the tax collector, is basically where you do it. Every county has an online portal that you can do it. I think that because most of the time that they know that your deed and everything like that is recorded with them, so they can see all that kind of stuff, but they want to see that your driver's license, that you're registered to vote, all of those things are add up and are the same with your new property, but you have to have been in it by December 31st, and then you have to apply by March 1st. So if you bought in January, go ahead and apply anyway because it's going to take effect for 2027. And I tell everybody to do it as soon as they purchase their home so you don't have to think about it, because when that date comes and goes, then you don't have it for that year. So you definitely want to make sure that you do that. So again, that is the homestead exemption that you want to make sure that you apply for within the next couple of weeks. And that will be absolutely great to make sure that you do that. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So one of the things that I found interesting this week is that it's talking about Florida's first-time buyers embrace co-buying. And with home prices up, more buyers are partnering with friends to afford a home, and experts urge clear planning and legal agreements. And I couldn't agree more that you would want to do that because you want to make sure that when you're doing that, that everything is all set up. And basically, you know, it's like it's not necessarily bad, but you know, I do know somebody that purchased a home from me actually within the last year, and what he did is he's single and everything and young. And so he was able to qualify for the home on his own, and then he actually got you know, roommates to come in and help him, you know, pay his payment. And so it wasn't, you know, overwhelming and everything like that. Now, the good news is that he is qualified on his own to afford the home, but he doesn't want to be, you know, home poor. He wants to have more choices and do more things and all of that. And so as a result of that, he got roommates to come in and, you know, rent rooms from him or whatever it is, you know, in order to help him pay the payments. And I personally like that way better than, you know, more than one person purchasing it that are just friends. And the reason for that is there's a lot of things that can go south on it. Number one, if one of the, you know, say that you go in everything 50-50, everybody puts 50% of whatever you're putting down. Everybody's going to pay 50% of the payment and all of that kind of good stuff. And then what happens when one person loses their job and they don't have the money to pay their half? You're still responsible for paying that full thing. And so you've got to know, you know, what you want to do. And then the other person, and then one person says, hey, you know, I'm going to get married and I want to go and, you know, get my money out because I want to buy something with my spouse. And you're going, okay, well, this is going to totally upset the apple cart in regards to what I'm doing. And am I going to have to, you know, sell that house right now? And I like where I live and I like what I'm doing and all that kind of good stuff. And so there's a lot of things that come into play with this that you're not necessarily thinking about. And so having an agreement that sets up how all of that is going to work, if one person can buy the other person out and what that's going to be and all of that kind of thing. And, you know, maybe even having everything set up at the beginning in regards to how much that is going to be and all of that might be something that's important. So, and it might end up being that, you know, you do have to sell because the other person wants to, because that's going to be your best bet. You don't want to have it that one person gets signed off and then they have to, you know, do something later. Everything needs to be clean and all of that, in my opinion. And so I just think that if you're going to do that, you definitely want to get legal advice. You want to look at the whole big picture and see what you can do and see what you can do on your own as opposed to just trying to, you know, go ahead and get things rocking and rolling, you know, to have co-buyers. Now, if they're family members and stuff like that, it's a whole different animal. because it's family, and there's other people that could jump in and possibly help you and that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that you do that. And here, I'm going to finish off the show today with tips to get mortgage ready in 2026, because basically, when it comes down to it, being mortgage ready is the best thing that you can do. You want to be focused on readiness, not necessarily rate timing. Pricing constraints remain, so early lender talks and clear budgets can help. So basically, what the bottom line is that I always suggest that if you're looking at purchasing a home, that the first thing that you do is, many times, and we have people that definitely excel at this. There's definitely a lot of lenders out there and all that kind of stuff, and we tend to work with people over and over again that really do a good job. And then we have certain people that we work with maybe once and we don't work with them again, and the reason is because they made things more difficult or unclear or whatever. And a lot of times they might be just starting in the industry and getting better, but you don't really necessarily want to be in a position where you're somebody's learning curve. You want to make sure that you've got all of your I's dotted and T's crossed. But when you do work with someone really good, what happens is that they go in there and they look at your situation, and then they advise you in regards to, what's going on or how you can make things better. I think I mentioned last week about a customer that I had that basically, when they first went and talked to the lender, they found that there was somehow a late payment on a car, and it was something that their debit card expired or something like that. And as a result of that, a payment was missed, and they didn't even realize it because it was automatic. And as a result of that, they had one late on their credit report. And so the lender suggested that in order to get a much better rate and something that they could definitely afford better, was that they needed to wait until that late was over a year away, that they did not have any lates in the last year on anything. And they were very diligent about it and made sure that they didn't do that. And as a result of that, what happened for them is that they were in very good shape in regards to getting their mortgage. And like I talked about them last week, is that was, I think, in 2020, and they're going to have their house paid off this year. And so they've really made great strides in getting that done, and we're very diligent about it. But they planned, and we knew that when the time came, that we started looking, about a month before they were going to be ready, so that we knew that we had the exact house, we had everything lined up and everything like that, in order to make sure that everything was going good. So basically, if you go ahead and have those conversations and with both us and the lender, then what that's going to do is that's going to make it, when it comes time for it, that you're not going to have any surprises, and you're going to have everything going exactly the way that you want to. And basically, it's like, when it comes down to it, I've run into lately some lenders that were actually trying to give advice, to the buyers, and they pretty much messed up a couple of things, for the buyer in doing that, in setting expectations that weren't accurate. And then there was some things that they had told the buyer that weren't accurate, and so it caused some additional problems too, which I'm not going to get into at the moment. But basically, when it comes down to it, who you work with matters. Is in everything in life, you want to make life easier, you want to make things work easier, and I definitely feel like working with us is that way. And so we work with people that make life easier. And that's what it's all about. But the best way for you to get ready to purchase is to actually meet with a lender and, specific ones if you're asking me. And I would tell you that they can definitely help you. And I was talking to one of them the other day, and when they were checking out your information, they used to always do hard credit pulls. And he said that they found ways now that they don't have to do that. So they've made it much easier, to not affect your credit when you're at least even just looking at what do I want to do. And so I think that's absolutely awesome and everything like that. But in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com. And we will see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.